Welcome to Talent X,
the Talent Experience podcast featuring authentic conversations on the future of work,
empowering you to better understand and deliver a best-in-class, future-proofed career experience.
For more insightful conversations, visit talentxpodcast.com.
We hope you enjoy this episode of the Talent X podcast.
Hey, it's Rhonda Taylor. Welcome to Talent X. This is the podcast that addresses everything about the talent experience. And today, this is a very special podcast because we have two incredible guests. We have our co-host, I'm going to hand over to Fulton, who is the co-founder of Field 50. And she is going to be carrying on a discussion with an analyst that many of us know. He's the vice president and principal analyst for Constellation, Holger Mueller. And Holger has a strong background working in the human capital management space with the future of work. And his focus is on tech optimization and next generation apps.
Don't worry about it. You don't have to read all this. We can talk about this. Everybody can.
We can talk about it. Okay, great.
Don't worry about that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, he's a very well-educated gentleman from Europe. And what I love about him is that he can speak 6 languages. Yeah. So on that note, Anne, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Facciamo questa intervista in italiano, giusto?
I was worried that you were going to spring a language on me, Holger, but we're so proud to have you on the call today. And we've been following the Constellation research and your thought leadership for a long time. So it's fabulous to have you on the call. And I know we're going to segue and talk about the America's Cup with, particularly with the Italians going up against New Zealand today again. Yep. But, I guess maybe we could even start there. So Fuel 50 is a technology company and we love to be innovators in the way that we deliver technology to the world and want to be game changers and so far ahead of the competition. But, what are your thoughts about the America's Cup racing today?
Well, first of all, my heart bleeds because it's the first America's Cup that I missed since 4 cups, right? So due to COVID, right? So, but that's fine. Being a sailing enthusiast is fine. And growing up in Italy, speaking Italian longer than English, this is of course a historic return after the Italians lost it 20 years ago against New Zealand in the final there, right? And so nobody could be more jazzed than at the race is at 1-1 right now, right? So
yes, exactly.
I don't remember an America's Cup which started 1-1, so it's going to be hopefully interesting races, which I hope very much.
No.
There's tons of things to be learned from the America's Cup for business, in my view, right? In my keynotes, I have like 3 lessons learned from the last America's Cup, which are basically you have to take risks, right? And then the risk the Emirates Team New Zealand took is they showed up late. I was in Bermuda for conferences 1.5 years before and taking the ferry from the to-be-built America's Cup village. Oracle was training and BAR was training and Saudi Arabia to know everything about the wind and so on. And the Kiwi showed up 6 weeks before, capsized their boat, right? So even not America's Cup historians know that capsizing the boat is bad stuff. They could have been out of it, broken it, injured people and so on, but they didn't. And they waited so long because they had this innovative new idea, which is lesson 2. Think out of the box, right? Yes. Traditionally on sailing ships, when you have to generate power, you do this with your arms because you have to have a stable stand, right? The Kiwis came up with this great idea as, we know that pressure class, that shipping class is going to be air pressure tied, and humans can produce more power on the bike with their legs than with their arms on the winch. And they showed up with 4 bikers, got everybody surprised, right? If they had shown up 2.5 years before, everybody would have copied the design because everyone said, duh. And personally, as a biker, I love this. I'm still sweaty coming up from my Peloton ride here. So it makes total sense. Right? So think out of the box and then rethink the organization, which I think in the last America's Cup was very interesting. We can talk about this one as well, because typically the helmsman is the god of the ship, right? He or she runs everything, right? And Oracle BMW USA came up with this BMW design steering wheel, which not only steers the ship, but also controls the angle of the ship, which is important for aerodynamics, right? So it was completely over-engineered. Whereas, again, on the other side, Emirates Team New Zealand had the skipper not being the helmsman. When does this ever happen in the America's Cup that the skipper is not the helmsman, right? But it was this young guy, which wasn't very well known, now, of course, famous and so on, but different story, right? So, and he's a skipper now, I think. But where they split the routes and the skipper was doing the lowly job of trimming the sails, right? And they split the things further that the angle guy was the front biker on the side and front. So totally different thinking of organization, which also leads us to this America's Cup, right? Because organization is the big discussion, right? What could possibly go wrong with two helmsmen, with which Luna Rossa, the Italians are competing, right? And interesting, like the learning, right? So in the pre-state rumors, there was a rumor that Emirates Team Museum is trying with two helmsmen, right? With Ashby being the backup helmsman anyway. So, but it's too late probably for them to change all the coordination which is needed for that, right? Which I love as a topic, because one of my overdue blog posts is about, I think 2 CEOs is better than one. The co-CEO situation which you have, unfortunately, is stopped in the come of companies. In my view, is a much more better model in general to run a company. So long story short, excited. Who's going to win the America's Cup?
Yes, so very, very interesting. And I think, you know, we always talk about Fuel 50's talent marketplace as being like a Kiwi Innovation in the America's Cup. And we think really carefully about, you know, what does that mean? And we want to be technologically advanced and sleek and powerful and fast, and so much beautiful design into the engineering of the boat, which we think of as our product. But we also think of the, you know, the sail as being, you know,
powered by it with taxpayer money, right? You pay for it.
Yeah, there's a contribution of that. But, you know,
yeah, you do, right? I was surprised in Sevilla. I sat next to the Minister of Tourism, Sports, and the America's Cup, because New Zealand, the government was sponsoring the America's Cup team, right? So and he was there in the early rounds for that reason, to see that the money is well spent, right? So,
exactly. There's a strong element of that here, you know, in terms of taxpayer support. But I think, you know, we also think about our boat as being powered by Olympian athletes, you know, these cyclists, you know, and we describe our team of fuelies as being grit, graft, grunt, and grind, but also gifted, right? Every single one of my team is like a gifted athlete, like these Olympians that are on these America's Cup boats today. But interesting you're bringing up, because I'm enjoying this whole dynamic around the dual helmsman on the Italian boat, and just thinking, I think it's exciting, and I love seeing that dynamic play out. And I'm wondering, you know, why we're not, you know, doing the same. But I mean, I think looking at it again at our boat.
The interesting talent dynamic is, right, the Italians started out with Francesco Mori, who was the helmsman. Then there's a chance to get amazing talent on board, right? Someone who's won the Americups twice, lost it once, has been in 6 finals, Jimmy Spithill. And then they change the organization and make the best out of it, right? And now they even have an advantage, right? So I think the lesson learned here, we can say already, because they made it to the final, right, is when there is amazing talent out there, you have to get the amazing talent in. It doesn't mean you have to ruffle the feather and change everything, but there could be organizations very malleable. There could be a good way in the organization to make it something which they can work, right? This is the individuals which have to work. And if you see them press conference, they work well together, right? They get along together because they want to win this thing, right? And having a common goal is something which gets people always together. So I think it's a great lesson learned already here at this point.
No, exactly. We're co-founded and you know, co-led across our entire business in terms of sharing responsibilities. And I think it's a wonderful dynamic that, you know, can be utilized. And I think the dynamic is really, really powerful in terms of always back each other up, right? And there's, you know, there's 2 heads, and you've got, you've doubled the talent and power onto that team. So I think it comes back to your point around, you know, taking a risk, right? Thinking outside the box, and what else can we do differently that's going to create advantage. And so I think it's beautiful. But you know, in terms of talent dynamics, right? So, you know, that's a beautiful dynamic that's playing out in the America's Cup right now in terms of talent risk and strategy around talent. And I think, you know, because of your involvement in our space, you know, we're keen to understand what you're seeing as being maybe shifting talent dynamics that have emerged over the last 12 months. I think we're just on the 12-month anniversary of the world locking down, you know. So have you, have you seen what are your observations of how the talent dynamics have shifted during this?
The way how people work, obviously, with them working from home is very, very different. And it looks like the longer, unfortunately, this pandemic goes, the more likely they're going to work from home, right? So there has to be a different way of leadership, right? That's the first thing, right? A leader which was great at doing the famous managing by walking around and looking people in the eyes and going to drinks after work or lunch in the break, right? Lunch with a different team member every day in the week lined up at his favorite restaurant, right? That is not going to work right now. So leaders have to change their skills. And it might be also potentially a more intrinsic person who's better at picking up on a phone call or on a video call if somebody is not doing as well, because we can't see the full body language. So I think it's going to be very, very different skills with these remote working teams, and even teams which can go to the office, right? People have realized, why should I spend 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hours a week on commuting, right? So I think we see new leadership requirements, but the most important thing which companies see, and we separate the companies in 3 large buckets in a pandemic world, right? They're the super busy ones, the hospitals and the essential business, basically, who are just realizing, oh my God, this is not a 5K race. This is the marathon. This is running much longer. We also have to invest into our systems again. We cannot stop everything just holding the fort down, right? So there's awakening there, which is good for the vendors and technology space doing things, and good for HR because they have to develop new things to make sure people don't burn out, have the skills for the future. They have huge hiring pressure to hire people because people want to not be in dangerous jobs and so on. So there's a lot of things to do which have to happen. The other ones are the stutterers, and they're even more kind of like in a challenge situation. I call them the stutterers because they're on, off, closed. Often the problem is by order of magnitude bigger because they have to do this across different cities, locations. And all of a sudden, it's no longer the central command headquarters telling you from the ivory tower, this is how you run your business. No, it's the local manager who's to make hiring decisions, opening decisions, salary decisions, because he or she is the only person who even sees people on that perspective, right? And has to tell them, sorry, we have to shut down again. We have to furlough you, or has to hire people to open up in 5 days. And these cycles, right? They used everything. Our systems are very well done to the average economic cycles of 7 years up, 7 years down. Right now, you have to operate on 7 weeks, potentially 7 days, up and down, closing 4 locations. And then there are the sidelines ones, right? Techie as we are with 3S is why the super busy, the stutterers, and the sideline ones. Sidelines ones don't even know if they're going to reopen their business like this, right? The airlines, right? Are you going to be an airline? Are you going to be in the hospitality business? Are you going to be something totally different? Yeah? So they have totally different systems from IT costs. They sit on IT infrastructures which don't make sense. They have to pivot quickly. And that comes back to the ability of employees then, and their innate capabilities and the one you can train. That's why we've seen a strong focus on training, obviously, and learning for people. And now it really comes back to, who are my best people? How can I get the best people in the right job, right? And if I want me to talk longer, right, I'm happy to talk about the concept there. It's called transboarding, right? It's a word I created between transfer and onboarding, right?
Yes.
Because yes, you will hire people from the outside, but transfers, especially now where companies pivot and change their value proposition, are going to be even more because you can get them quicker on the place if they have the skills and you're a better employer to keep your people in new jobs, right? Make their life more interesting. And the transfers in the company usually outnumber the new hired people by 5 to 7 to 8. Right? So if you get the transfer experience better, right? Qualify people earlier for the next job, get them running on the next job, transition them better in the next job, right? The transition is easy, right? Remember when in office you had to move if you were changing departments? Today you don't have to move anything, right? You just, this is the day where the cost center cut over, right? Because everybody's working from home and many places people are working from home, right? So the transporting, the speed, which leads to the overall research which matters, enterprise acceleration. Companies have to move faster, have to become more agile. So transporting is a super important process in that whole infrastructure.
That's an amazing kind of concept, I think, because I mean, we do need talent agility in the workforce today more so than ever. But this ability to, as you say, prepare talent, for the, to be agile and to be fast movers and ready for the next project or assignment that might be coming their way unexpectedly. But also, I mean, I'm liking your, 3 buckets, and helping those that have got the marathons in front of them, as well as those that need this extreme agility and unpredictability in there. And so we're preparing people for all sorts of unknowns. But I think the transporting kind of conceptualization into, the new kind of career currency is really important to support that enterprise acceleration right now. So what do you see going into that, supporting that kind of methodology?
You have to understand what can your people do, right? And there's this big trend around skills right now, largely fueled by a company starting with W and ending with Day, right? Who finally has got this done, and now everybody's kind of like reacting on what they're doing. But unfortunately, the way how they approach it is the electronified traditional way how to capture skills, right? We know in the old world, right, you would fill out forms and the forms would be collated and tabulated, and half a year later or 1 year later, you would know, oh, this is what my people knew a year ago, right? You don't know what they're doing right now. And yes, that's being proved to be done better. There's no question with electronic bills, with cloud, with AI. But I think very strongly, and I'm looking for vendors and companies, and I have a few which are doing this as custom applications. I think our digital artifacts that we create and our digital exhaust tells enough about your skills dynamically to come up with which skills does somebody have, right? And then understand that it's there, like make this video as an example, right? You may not be able to listen that we talk about talent management, right? But from the people who look at that video afterwards and what kind of potentially actions they take, if they like it or not like it, you can kind of like figure out if you had a good conversation or if you maybe are good at this, because you might find in your video archives a few more videos of this, right? So obviously you would then say that Anne has the ability to do a video interview conversation, right? And we see this lady Rhonda always talking at the beginning. So obviously she does the introduction pretty well for that, if you look for someone doing an introduction video in the company. And there's the other lady, Pagan, it's French or English pronunciation? She's mute, right? So I make you French is better. Ooh la la. Pagan is very good at managing this whole thing, because there's signatures all over the digital artifacts and the digital exhaust, right? The things you threw away because it didn't make it into publication, right? So the skills can be derived by what we do because we create so much digital things and digital work, right? And you can derive many. So people have been asking, what do we do? People manufacture cars, right? They have no digital exhaust. Well, they check in, you know when they left their house, you know when they go on break, you know which systems they use, and most importantly, you know what quality the car has they just built. And you can track that back and figure out when Jack, Joe, and Jill work together, the car is always bad. And if you team up Jack, Joe, and John, the car is going to be better and find a new home for Jill and a different job, right? So this is the biggest missing link in performance management in general, that the real world performance has no way to really be tied outside from spreadsheets into the real performance management systems, right? Once you have the value creation of teams being measured and you know the quality of that and bring that together into performance management and what skills they have, then I think you've changed something.
Yeah, and I think the skills intelligence, that we're supporting, our ecosystem with, is increasingly vital. And the way that we're thinking about it is, contribution index rather than performance evaluation. But, what's been, as you say, those digital contributions of somebody, across the ecosystem, and how do we collate that? And how do we surface that information back into the hands of not just HR, but into the hands of leaders to be able to say, okay, yeah, we've got this capability or skill, doesn't exist as a job today, but it's aggregated into, an emerging talent set that we need to find these kind of capabilities, and how do you surface that? So, and I think it's twofold, so we're certainly supporting clients with that kind of skills intelligence, but it's also twofold because we also want, exactly as your example before, we want the workforce to be reskilled and ready, armed and able, and getting some great aggregate at scale gains of people actually doing the preparation for what might be trending in demand skills in that organization. So to us, that's super important. Really keen to understand, any thoughts, additional thoughts that you have on, the shift that the pandemic's created in the kind of talent technologies that are being used today or that are going to be in demand in the decade ahead. Love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think like I said before, the biggest demand has been created for a new way of leadership, different skills of leadership and different systems of leadership. And that's kind of like, I would say, a new category potentially for HR, or it traditionally would be in the HR core domain, right? How do you manage and lead your people, and how do you make a people leader more effective in knowing what people can do? On the talent management side, I think we have to empower the talent, the hiring manager much better, right? The whole process of the recruiters might be a different place. It's difficult to get people in place, right? The manager has to live with that person which comes on board anyway. So serve the candidates to them, allow people to onboard much faster. So everything has to move faster, new ways of learning. And I hope that somebody's going to fix performance management at some point, because it cannot be fixed by software alone, right? That's what has been oversold by many talent management vendors. I think there's no software which can be created where somebody says, oh, I'm looking so much forward to go in the office tomorrow and get 3 negative performance reviews and potentially fire one of the people, right? That software cannot do that, right? So there's been, this is software plus, and the plus component has largely been missing to showing people what to do. But we know that the direction is right. We need more continuous feedback. We need more little artifacts to figure that out. So the direction is there. The best practice has not been established.
Yeah, and as work is being delivered, more in deconstructed units like projects, right? So instead of having a job that you had your KPIs, you're now contributing to 5 different projects with different objectives and different kind of evaluation criteria, but allowing a tighter, feedback loop. So at the end of that project or gig or assignment, whatever it is, that, the way that we like to conceptualize it is to push the ownership for getting that feedback back onto the employee, right? The end of that assignment, get feedback, and then you aggregate that, and that gets surfaced into the hands of your leader when it comes around to having those growth conversations and development conversations going forward. But yeah, at the end of that assignment, so it's becoming a shorter unit, right? But and that you can invite feedback from your peers as well as your leaders and the project owner, so that that we're creating, as you described before, Holger, that kind of digital footprint, that becomes measurable around impact and contribution. So yeah, I do agree that we need to create a shift, because the world is accelerating, and I like your kind of focus on the enterprise acceleration as being the outcome. We need to help organizations respond. Just interested in what changes you might be anticipating in workforce dynamics over the next decade. We're it's going to be a really fascinating decade, and the industrial era is well behind us, and the digital era. What can we expect ahead that you're thinking about?
I think it will be a huge saving grace, you can say, for the first world, which has an aging problem, right? We're working right now in an economy which is optimized of 6 people working, 1 person retired, and in 10-15 years we're using into 2 people working, 1 person retired, assuming the 65 typically retirement age, right? And one of the hardest things for people when they get older is to go to the office. It's not to sit in a chair and do their work. Now it's basically from their bed to the chair where to do their work. So I think it's going to give a break to the first world, which has its unfavorable aging dynamics, which we're not prepared. So to a certain point will hold us back, right? I was saying people will love AI, right? If you're concerned about AI, just talk to that Japanese senior who prefers a robot to a system than a human, right? Because the robot is reliable, is always there, doesn't steal from you, which is a big concern of seniors in Japan, right? And they prefer the robot over the real person. So we might see less AI automation than we want to from that part, but we will be able to work much, much longer than we ever have before, because that gruesome commute in some places is no longer part of the whole equation. So I think that's going to be a big break from that perspective.
No,
Just one, because we're running out of time here. Because we still have to come back to who's going to win today at the America's Cup.
I'm going another 1-1. That's what I'm thinking today. That's my prediction, Holger. What about you?
I hope it's going to be a tie again, right?
Yeah, I think so.
The suspense is going to be there.
Keep it interesting. And
the really interesting thing is that obviously nobody can overtake with the sports class, right? They're super exciting boats. I mean, every time when people have to wear a helmet on something moving fast, sign me up. That's exciting, right? So boats which go 80 kilometers and faster an hour, and people have to have even their scuba equipment that they can get air under the boat trapped, potentially, God forbid that will happen, right? But there's no overtaking. No overtaking to a certain point. The cross is coming, who can overlap or not, right? That's the interesting thing of the match racing of the America's Cup. So may the better team win is my part, right? So always what's been like, right? I speak Italian longer than English, so change is good, right? But especially if nobody manages to overtake in the race, whatever the square is, right? I like Luna Rossa to win, because then hopefully there's going to be a different boat, because as exciting as the boat is, I want to see some overtaking action, right? Whereas I'm concerned if the Kiwis win, they might keep the same boat, which is going to hopefully attract more teams, has upsides too, because the boats are very expensive, only 4 teams, has not happened since a long time. But I think they will double down on the same technology, and it doesn't provide us very exciting races right now.
Yeah, no, we want an exciting race for sure. And I think, obviously you're passionate about the America's Cup, and you're passionate about the work that you do. And I think, we'd love to hear, at TalentX, we want everyone to love the work that they do. And we'd love to hear about, what are you passionate about with the work that you do, as our closing question today.
Well, what motivates me is seeing if my work can make a difference, right? If somebody sees, oh, I learned something, I see something, then most importantly, I've done something differently and was more successful, or comes back to me also and say, look, I tried what you said and it doesn't work. And I love to hear that even more, because that's the only way to get better, right? Trying to make a difference for my research and my work here is enough motivation to get me out of bed.
Wow. You two, we could listen to you all day. You're just such a wealth of information. And Ann Fulton, the host, Holger, you do incredible work. Thank you for joining TalentX. Thank you for making TalentX a better product. And again, a last word in parting, Holger?
No, I mean, exciting times. It's hopefully that we come out stronger and better out of the pandemic. And I think from pure technology and leadership and HR perspective, there's so much upside out of the disruption of that, right? So there's this joke of saying who has done more for digital disruption than the CEO, the CFO, the CIO, the COVID officer, right? The COVID officer, which is not really officer. And we've done a lot of transformation, improvement of things. I mean, remember 3-4 years ago, I had panels where people said, no, people can't work at home. We're not going to be productive. That's the wrong way of doing this. And secretly, they were trying to get people leave because they didn't want to do the commute. And now we see that for most companies, if they're not affected, they're even more productive, right? Yes. So what kind of like traditional like horses, how you call the thing that horses have on there so they can't
blinders.
Blinders, right? So we had the blinders on for the longest time on the working from home perspective, which is a really sad thing. So hopefully that helps us, and hopefully we learn from it for different aspects too, where we also have the blinders on.
Yes, it definitely is a time of learning. So again, thank you to all. This is Rhonda Taylor from TalentX. Thank you. Remember in these times to test negative, but stay positive. Bye all.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the TalentX podcast.
For more talent experience and future of work conversations, visit talentxpodcast.com.
Follow us on Twitter at TalentX Podcast.
Or join the conversation with #TalentXPodcast on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or Twitter.
TalentX, the Talent Experience podcast, was brought to you by the fabulous Fuelies at Fuel 50.